I cannot tell you how excited I am and how honored I am to have Katie speaking with us today. Today's topic is creating the life that you love. And April is all about abundance. It's about money and values, because usually we're thinking April's tax season. So let's think about the abundance that we have and how do we create the life that we love. I'm going to be introducing Katie momentarily. And welcome to Colorado Career Connectors. If I have not personally met you, I'm Chelle Johnson, and I started Colorado Career Connectors in March of 2021. And we have over 900 people in our community now, which is absolutely crazy to me. It's grown organically. It's grown through word of mouth. We've done basically no advertising except through LinkedIn and through other job networking groups, etc. So thank you for joining us today. As CEO of Colorado Career Connectors and founder, my goal is to bring the highest level content to you, quality, high level speakers, and the heads of recruitment and HR from companies around Colorado. And you're going to see more of that today. We have 24 events per year, just like this. We meet every other Monday from 12 to 1 or 12 to 1:30. And many times we have top recruiters from Colorado companies that will do breakout rooms with you. My background is from Lockheed Martin and Comcast. I was the director of Comcast talent acquisition and a senior manager at Lockheed Martin. I'm a premier career coach for Anita B, which is the largest consortium for computer engineering women in the world. I'm pretty honored to be that. I'm only one of 20 in the world that does that. So when I'm not busy doing 24 events per year, I own Best You Career Advantage, and I'm a career strategist. Over the past 2 years, since 2019, and I started my business in 2019, I've helped over 90 people fast track and land better paying jobs where they align with your values. And I specifically love working with diversity allies and women over 40. However, a lot of my clients have had some corporate trauma, whether it's gaslighting, their boss toxicity, corporate toxicity, stress, overwhelm. And that is why we bring you the free content to our community that we do, because we know what it has been like in the pandemic. We know what it's been like with now the job market going crazy with the Great Resignation and the Great Reset. And we are not a transactional type of group. We want you to hear nuggets of abundance and holistic transformation. And so you're going to hear some woo-woo type topics. You're going to hear some cuss words today, because the truth is that we bring some badass speakers to you. And the topic today is one that there's a lot of life lessons for. So I invite you to follow Colorado Career Connectors. We have a website that we have built. And none of this would be possible without my right hand, my director of operations, Yvette Bell. She will be monitoring the chat, as will I, once Katie gets started. She is a graphic designer and brand consultant. She's done all of my websites, puts all of my events together. So if you're looking for someone, she owns her own business. If you're looking for a logo or a websites, anything like that, Yvette is teed up for that. I'm lucky enough to have her as my director of operations. If you haven't checked out Colorado Career Connectors, it not only has events that we have coming up, but it has community events that are put on by the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce. The Best Places to Work event is coming up with Denver Business Journal. You'll find community events, job seeker events, and we've only been out there for 1 year. So thank you so much for your participation, your encouragement, your organic word of mouth. and helping us to grow. This Sunday, you'll actually see Colorado Career Connectors and Best You Career Advantage highlighted in the business section. A business reporter named Julie Kohler just interviewed us to talk about the She session and women in the workplace. So please be on the lookout for that. And that's how we grow. But if you know people that should be speaking to this kind of community, if you know people, or if you're interested in hearing from specific companies, I want you to contact Yvette or me to let us know who you'd like to hear from. We've had Zendesk, DocuSign, Acuity Health, Ibotta, Shelf Engine. And today we are sponsored by IQ Clarity, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. It's so nice to see all of you here. But we have sponsors that help us do that. And we've only started these sponsorships since January. So if you know people who you think would like to be in front of this type of community, please let me know. As we are looking for partners, strategic partners, and sponsors. So we talked a little bit about Colorado Career Connectors. And like I said earlier, I am a transformational coach. In fact, a number of you on here I know personally, or you've been part of Positive Intelligence. 7 years ago, I led a group to Spain to do El Camino de Santiago, and I'm doing the same thing this September. And you might be saying, what on earth does a trip to Spain have to do with finding a better job or a career? This is an inner pilgrimage where you will walk throughout Spain and Portugal, about 80 miles over 7 days. And it's solitude, it's group community, it's drinking a lot of red wine. It's just very authentic fun. And we're doing this September 17th through the 28th. If you're interested, there's a QR code here. Everything I do is about inner transformation. It's about bringing out the best of who you are. And by doing this 7 years ago, I got the seeds, which allowed me to change my life completely in 2019. And I'd love to have you join us. We've got, for Colorado Career Connectors, some unbelievable events coming up. Our next event is the 25th of April, and it's those taboo topics that you want to ask talent and HR folks about. If you have a crucial conversation coming up with your boss, you'll want to be on the call. If you have questions about why do I get ghosted, what is this about? This event is for you. So you have 2 weeks to think about all of your taboo questions and to actually get one-on-one time with HR and talent professionals to answer your questions, because our mission is to bring you content that is different, not just talking heads, but content that really digs deeper into who you are, how you live, and how you can get more money, be more abundant, and have those better conversations. And then Mother's Day is coming up on May 8th. And on May 9th, I am so happy to have Lupe Hurt, who is one of the founders of Second Act Women, and Ana Brambilla, who is one of our sponsors. The three of us so far, I have 2 more people that I'm waiting to hear for that are very high level influencers in our community to talk about the power of women in the workplace and the myths that we have to overcome. This is not just for women, it's for diversity allies, for men, it's for anyone who identifies as a woman. We welcome everyone, and we are very happy to say that inclusivity is part of who we are. I'd love to be in contact with you. Please let me know how I can personally help you. And I also want to let you know, in the end of May and beginning of June, we are having interviewing. We're having 2 sessions that are just focused on how do you show up as your authentic self. And we also are having master storytelling for interviews. So in the next 4 events, you're going to have huge influencers in the market. You're going to hear from the best speakers on how to tell stories, how to go into networking. And I sincerely hope that you will join us. We're so thrilled that you're here today. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for the day. Katie Doble is the Vice President of IQ Clarity, and she's become a great connector of mine and a friend. IQ Clarity is the business that she works for and is your partner with talent acquisition and sourcing strategy. They connect companies with exceptional resources for project work and direct hire initiatives. And I know that this is one of the busiest times that Katie has had. In fact, about 5 minutes before today's session, she's like, I just got another offer for one of my direct hire placements. IQ Clarity strives to find the best possible match for everyone they serve in a transparent, thoughtful, and cost-effective manner. They work with tech, creative marketing, and HR. I have personally worked with IQ Clarity because I'm also a part-time recruiter. So I've seen all sides. Katie is absolutely an asset to everyone, and we're very thrilled to have her here today. Katie, let me introduce you. Just bear with me. We've got a lot, 34 people, super excited. Just bear with me 1 second.
Okay.
Or, since we're an informal group, what I can tell everybody about Katie is that she is a badass. She is probably a bigger connector than I am. She met her husband on LinkedIn. She's been a recruiter on the agency side and corporate side for years. She knows so many people in the technology industry, SaaS companies. And the way I was introduced to Katie was through my HR partners at some startups here in town. And I have been so honored to hear about Katie's story, to get to know Katie as a friend, as a colleague, as a professional. And so without further ado, Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome to Colorado Career Connectors, everyone. This is being recorded. We will be sending this out afterward. Katie, we can't wait to hear about your story.
Thank you, Chelle, and thank you to Colorado Career Connectors and IQ Clarity for sponsoring. I now need to figure out how to share my screen with you. So I'm going to hope this is the right one. What are you seeing? Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yes, perfect. Thank
okay, you. I did it. That's what I get the most nervous about. So today I'm going to share my story with you all about, and hang on, I need to kind of move some things around for viewing purposes, about how a life-changing event shifted my perspective and really changed my relationship with my career. So hold on for a second. And so life-changing events can be a lot of things. They can be positive and they can be negative. It can be marriage, it can be divorce, it can be having a kid, it can be experiencing miscarriages, loss, grief, illness, near-death experiences. And I think what I have found is that a lot of times it doesn't hit until we're a little bit further into our careers. So this was me in my 20s. This is a fake butt. This is not real, but I moved to Denver when I was 26 years old. I followed my sisters out here. At the time I had 2 nephews, and my goal was just to be the best aunt in the world. And I was super social. I was networking every single night of the week. I may or may not have called it net boozing. I played in 5 different competitive sports leagues. This is me getting my face smacked at nationals for Gaelic football in Philadelphia. And life was easy and life was fun. And I have a marketing background. So my first job when I moved out here was a marketing manager for a roof consulting company, which is exactly as sexy as it sounds. And so I had a boss for the first time who was focused on my strengths. And he would say to me all the time, wow, this is what you're really good at. And this was shocking to me because I'd only ever had bosses who would say, Katie, you need to work on this. Katie, you don't do this good enough. And so it was working with that company that I started to recognize some strengths that I had and started to shift how I could play off of those strengths to make sure that I was in a career that was feeding off of that. And of course, making me feel more successful because it was something that came naturally. And so a particular event that happened, Richard was my boss at the time, and we were traveling for work, and we were at a restaurant, and the bartender and I were chatting, and we were trying to figure out, who we both knew and what we had in common. And when the bartender walked away, I said to my boss, I just get the biggest kick out of meeting a complete stranger and finding common ground. And he said to me, "You just described my worst nightmare." And that was an aha moment for me, because I realized that something that comes so naturally to me is something that doesn't come naturally to other people. And it's not how it doesn't make everybody tick. And so while I loved working for him and roofs were as exciting as they were, I had noticed this pattern in my career where at about a year and a half, I felt like I was hitting a plateau. So I'd rise up, I'd be doing great, and then all of a sudden I would just sort of flatline, and I wasn't excited anymore, and I wasn't feeling challenged anymore. And so I hit this plateau at that company, and by chance I was introduced to a recruiter. And so I met with that recruiter, and it was right about that time that I did StrengthsFinders for the first time. I talk about StrengthsFinders, I would say, on a weekly basis, but I particularly speak about it when I'm talking to people who are either interviewing for new jobs or looking to make a complete shift in their careers. And I was making a huge shift. I met with this recruiter. She was a marketing recruiter. And at the end of the meeting, I said to her, "I want your job." Like, I didn't know you could get paid to connect people. And I was the person in kindergarten who got the new kid paired with her because the teacher knew by the end of the day, Katie Ortman, my old name, would make sure that student knew everyone in the classroom. And this happened all through grade school and high school. And then in high school, I was the one getting all of my friends' jobs. And so this was something that was just a natural thing I was already doing. And I met with this recruiter, and I was like, wait a minute, I can get paid to do this. So I did StrengthsFinder. My strengths are communication, empathy, positivity, maximizer. And my number one strength is woo, winning others over, which really explains my friend hoarding tendencies, which is what I describe myself as. And so when I interviewed, I met with the recruiter. I told her I wanted her job. A couple of weeks later, they had an opening on the team. And I met with her boss, and I said, "Listen, I'm a strong communicator. I'm a very empathetic person, and I'm an obsessive connector." And he said, "I think you're going to do really well with this." And I did. So for any of you who have not done this, it is an amazing, powerful exercise, and I would highly recommend it. So by May of 2013, I was now in my early 30s, and I was loving my job. And I'd been in it for 3 years. I doubled my record stay, and really was at the top of my game. And I was driving to visit a client one day, and I had a coworker in the car with me, and this black line just started dancing across the windshield. And I looked at my coworker and I said, "Do you see that black line?" And she was like, "No, and I would like to drive home." And so we get to the meeting, and we're sitting there with this super metrics driven CMO. And I mean, I am just completely out of it because something is wrong, and I know something is wrong. And so I start tapping my shoulders, and I noticed that I could see this hand tapping my right shoulder, but I couldn't see this hand. So my peripheral vision was cut off right about here. I called my ophthalmologist, and they said, "Why don't you come in the next morning?" And so the next morning I drove into the ophthalmologist appointment, and he noticed a bump on my retina, and he said, this could be serious. It could be a retina tear. And so I need you to go see this retina specialist right now. So I got back in my car, and I drove to a retina specialist, and I got my eyes dilated for the second time that day. And I had an ultrasound, and the doctors left. And I waited and I waited, and the doctors came in, and they told me that I had uveal or ocular melanoma. Breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, all of these major cancers say cancer at the end, and melanoma doesn't. And I didn't know a lot about melanoma at the time. And so I wondered if it was cancer, but I didn't know confidently. And so I looked at the doctor and I said, "I'm sorry, is that cancer?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, can it be life-threatening?" And he said, "It can be if it spreads." So I'm 31 years old. I'm sitting alone in this doctor's office, and this is a major trigger for me. Getting a cancer diagnosis is going to be a trigger for anybody, but I lost my mom to pancreatic cancer when I was 15 years old, and I never thought I'd hear the words, "You have cancer." And so I left the doctor's office. I called my sister in tears. She came and got me. We went back to the doctor later that day to figure out what was the game plan. And so the game plan was they would first scan my whole body to make sure that it had not spread. And if it hadn't, they would perform radiation therapy targeted to my left eyeball. And during the radiation, they would biopsy the cells to determine what we were dealing with. And so thankfully, full body scans showed that I didn't have cancer anywhere else in my body. And I went under for the radiation, and I had an eye patch, a lead eye patch on my face for a week, and I became the coolest aunt in the world. And the biopsy results came in, and I was a 1A, which meant that there was a less than 2% chance of metastatic disease. And I experienced this life high. Like, I had just flirted with my mortality. I had become a cancer survivor in 22 days, and I was going to be okay. One of the results from the radiation was that I lost complete vision in my left eye. So I was 100% blind in my left eye. Should have been wearing a helmet as I adapted to life without depth perception. I remember going with one of my business partners to a meeting, and we were turning a corner following my client, and I totally ricocheted off the wall. And I was so embarrassed, and I was like, well, that's me right now. And I still run into door frames now and again. But really, it changed my perspective, obviously quite literally and figuratively. And what I found was that I was questioning everything else in my life except for my career. My career was my one constant. It was the one thing that I knew was okay. I knew was going to kind of keep me grounded throughout all of this. And so later that fall of 2013, I was doing some ad calls, which in the agency world is when you target a company who has a job posting and you try to pitch them a candidate, you try to get them to engage. It's business development, my favorite part of the job. And I was doing an ad call, and I found the manager of the Denver office for this company that I was trying to pitch a candidate to. And I landed on the LinkedIn page of Katie Doble. And I melted. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is really cute. So I sent him a LinkedIn request, and he accepted. And I tried to pitch our services, and we kind of started this email exchange back and forth. And I finally said, if you ever want to network, I love meeting new people. And so we met to network, and very quickly fell in love after that. And so we dated for about a year, and we were traveling the world, and he's from the UK. So this picture is his amazing Union Jack suit. And life was good and easy. And he bought a ring, and his plan on Thanksgiving Day of 2014 was to propose to me. One of the follow-up procedures for my cancer was that they wanted to monitor my liver. If ocular melanoma metastasizes or spreads, it typically spreads to the liver. And so I would get liver ultrasounds every 6 months. And 2 days before Thanksgiving, I went in for my second liver ultrasound. So the first one had been 6 months prior, and it was totally fine. And I went in that morning, and the tech seemed a little bit more thorough than the time before, but I didn't think anything of it because I was a 1A. It wasn't supposed to spread. So I went to work, and I was meeting with a client that afternoon, and my phone started blowing up in my pocket. And I finally left my client's office, and I got to my car, and I checked my voicemail, and I had a voicemail from the oncologist herself. And this is where the cussing comes in. Fuckity fuck, fuck, fuck. Nobody wants to get a phone call from the oncologist. It's never good news. And so what she told me was that they found 12 suspicious lesions on my liver, and that it was very likely that it had metastasized, and that I was that 2%. And so I spent the next 2 days in the fetal position, just terrified and sobbing. And my sisters called Nick, and they said, well, what are you going to do? We think you should put the proposal off. And he said to them, it doesn't change anything. She's still the same girl I fell in love with, and I still want to marry her. And so for the record, I won the husband lottery. He's an amazing man. And so on Thanksgiving Day, we went to the airport and my dad was flying in to be with me. My dad is an internist in Omaha, Nebraska. He hadn't planned to spend Thanksgiving with me, but the day after they were doing a liver biopsy to confirm my diagnosis. And so he came in and he got to witness the proposal. And it was just such a raw, beautiful day. I was terrified, but I was also just next level happy with this proposal and that Nick was really committing to me in sickness and in health. And so the next day we went in with my dad and my sisters and my new fiance, and I had a liver biopsy that confirmed that I had stage 4 incurable cancer. I was told that I had one treatment option and that would maybe give me 16 more months to live. And so I started referring to my dad as my agent because he went into agent mode. He called doctors all across the country and he wanted to find a better treatment option for us, which typically means clinical trials. And so my dad got me into a clinical trial at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and I was to start treatment for that at the beginning of January in 2015. My work was so supportive. I had an amazing team of colleagues, and my boss was supportive. Everybody was supportive. What do you need? We can cover for you. And people kept telling me to take time off. And I could not take time off because if I was left alone, if I was left unattended, if I was left to my thoughts, I was planning my funeral in my head. I was trying to figure out how I could source a zebra printed casket to make people smile at my funeral. I was figuring the soundtrack out. What songs are they going to play? And I was just in a really, really dark place. And so work became something that was sort of my escape from everything. So at the start of January of 2015, I moved to New York City and I spent 5 weeks there and FaceTimed with my team every day. My company had an office in Midtown, and I really got to kind of live normally while I was navigating this really scary time. I had to be there for the 5 weeks because I had scans and tests and all of these different things going on throughout that time. And then in February, I flew home, and from there, I would fly to New York once a month for what I called my drug deal to pick up my medication or to get scans. And so throughout all of that, I was managing side effects like a full body rash and constant diarrhea and fatigue and loss of appetite. And I developed intolerances for coffee and wine, which is just so tragic. And I lost almost 30 pounds, which I didn't really have to lose. I flew home at the beginning of February, and Nick and I got married 14 or 15 days after I came home. In April of that year, I made it to my company's President's Club. And I was really hoping I'd be able to do both, go and get my drugs in New York and still be in Vegas for this event that I had worked so hard to be at. And the first night at the event, the CEO said, you know, we really hope to see you all here again next year. And in my mind, I thought, I hope I'm alive next year. And this was literally the pattern of my thoughts at the time. Thankfully I was. So in 2016, I was back in Vegas, and somehow in 2015, the year that I traveled to New York City over a dozen times and had multiple treatments after that, I had my best year ever at work. And that year I was back at President's Club and I met one of the bigwigs at the company I was working for. And before I could finish shaking his hand, he was walking away from me. He didn't even make eye contact. And I realized whether or not I am moving on and going to a different company, or I am literally no longer breathing, I was seen as completely expendable. I was someone that they would replace and they would move on. And it just made me realize how much, whilst a lot of people at the company cared for me, a lot of people didn't. And that was a really, really pivotal moment in my career. So that's when it all started to change. Really, I had been sort of in this survival fight or flight mode, and work had been my constant. And then all of a sudden with that interaction, I was questioning everything. And I was starting to wonder, what am I doing to take care of myself right now? Is this what I want? And so the wheel started turning, and everything really started to shift in that moment. And so at the start of 2016, I had my first break in treatment. And so during that time, I was on a break in treatment, and I started to do some thinking, and I realized that I wanted to cut down to 4 days a week. And I knew that would mean taking a step back in management. And so I approached my boss about it, and he was like, well, where is this coming from? Because I wasn't in treatment. And so there's this perception as a cancer patient that if you look fine, you must be fine. And that if you're not in treatment, then you're totally fine. And so I realized that everyone thought I was just fine, and I wasn't. I was drowning, and I was trying to figure out how to balance all of these things in my life. And it was hard. And so I put in this request, and it was approved. And the following week, we found out my tumors had grown, and I had to get back into treatment. And I was really grateful that I made the ask when I did, because it made it easier for me to really take that time to step away. So I was 1/5 retired, and I started taking my Fridays to recalibrate, whether that meant sometimes it was just paying bills or doing laundry. Sometimes it was writing. I was getting a lot of joy and healing through my writing. And I realized I wanted to do more writing. I wanted to do a blog. I wanted to write my memoir. And I wanted to do more speaking engagements. And so I really took Fridays to figure out how to create that balance in my life. And it was glorious. And the treatment that I started at that time was the first time that I had chemotherapy. And so I lost my hair for the first time. And that was another interesting thing professionally, because I think it was that there I was with this physical reminder that this is something I'm carrying with me. And I think when you don't have that physical reminder, people think you're fine. And so it was a big shift. The Fridays off were great. And, but I started to realize as I started to chase these dreams that I felt like I had to keep them a secret at work. I felt like if I talked about my blog or I talked about other things I was passionate about, that by certain people on my team, it was seen as sort of a threat of this, Katie's going to leave. Katie's got one foot out the door. And that was a big thing for me, realizing that I was working in a place that didn't support anything beyond this is what you're doing for the company. So I finally got the courage to leave. I went to a smaller agency, and it was a little bit of the same thing at the smaller agency. And so I was just really struggling. And there I was only working 3 days a week, but I was still struggling with how can I have this balance? Like, can I have it all? Can I have the speaking and the writing? And can I have the recruiting, which I love? It's my dream job, and it's lucrative, and it supports these passions of mine. And then suddenly the universe started bitch slapping me with this message. And I think this is the biggest takeaway I want anyone to take from today. A coworker of mine bought me Danielle Laporte's daily journal called What I Will Do to Feel the Way I Want to Feel. And around that time, I was reading a book, and the author talked about this same concept of, we try to do everything, but we don't always focus on feelings. And so then I went in to see my energy healer, this amazing woman, and she's just great. I can kind of tell her, like, here's what I'm struggling with, and then she'll put me on the table and work her magic. And so I go into her office, and she says, what do you want to work on today? And I was like, well, I think I need to leave this job, but I'm going to give it 6 more months. And she said, Katie, how do you want to feel? And I kind of looked at her funny, and she asked me, how do you feel when you go into work every day? To which I very maturely responded. And then she said, okay, how do you feel when you tell your story, when you write? And I was like, okay, I see what you're doing with this exercise. And she also told me, you put conditions on everything. You try to control everything. And I want you to just start to meditate and sit with these feelings. I want you to start to just think about the way you feel when you're sharing, and the way you feel when you're spending time with your nieces and nephews and doing the things that bring you joy. And so I started to do that. And every day starting January 1st, and I think this would have been 2019, I meditated on this. I sat with my crystals and I meditated on the feelings that I have when I'm doing what I love. And I said to the universe, help me serve my higher purpose. Help me find this way to have it all. And 7 days later, I got fired for the first time in my life. And I was just like, okay, universe, you do not mess around. And so I finally took some time. In 2019, I took the time. I traveled. I worked on my book, and I just tried to figure things out on how do I create this space where I can earn the income that I need, but also do the things that I love. So at the end of 2019, I came to this realization that I knew I wasn't going to die anytime soon. So I was really grappling with this. How do I create this life, continue living, continue fighting for my life, because I was not in the clear. Since my stage 4 diagnosis, I have been in 4 clinical trials. I have had 2 liver embolization procedures where they inject 30 million radioactive beads into the liver. I had Gamma Knife, a proven concept on Grey's Anatomy, which a friend assured me when it spread to my brain in 2018. I've had 1 laparoscopic liver resection and a major operation that removed half of my liver. And I always worked through all of my treatments. And so I needed to figure out how to get back into work without sacrificing all of the things that I had worked for. And so I decided I was going to do my own thing. And I reached out to a mentor of mine named Ted, and I wanted to pick his brain because he had done this a few years prior. And we went to coffee, and I told him about my writing, and I told him about my travel and all of these things that I love that bring me joy. And then I told him about my job and that I want that as well. And he said, Katie, why don't you just come and work for me? So IQ Clarity specializes in tech placements, and I come with this background in HR and creative and marketing. And what he described to me was kind of a no-brainer. But he kept talking about my personal goals, and he was so excited that that was something that was important to me. And so he said, I will support you. If you want to work 4 days a week, fine. If you want to, whatever you want to do, I will support you. But I think it's great that you want to speak. I think it's great that you want to write. And so let's do it. And so I joined him at the end of 2019. And it was one of the best career decisions I have ever made. I knew I didn't really want to run my own business because I hate anything financial or tech or anything like that. So it's been a really, really good setup. And obviously 2020 was a really tough year. And on top of the pandemic, we learned that my tumors had doubled in size in May of 2020. And when I called Ted crying with this news, he said, we've got your back, whatever you need, take all the time you need, I'll cover for you, like whatever you need. And so we explored a few different treatment options that we had on the back burner. And I ended up enrolling in this clinical trial that had several steps that happened throughout the summer. And then in September of 2020, I went to Pittsburgh for 20 days. My husband and I checked in. Well, he stayed at an Airbnb, and I checked into the hospital, and I had 7 days of chemo. And these are all, the first 3 pictures here are that experience. The last picture was when I looked like a transformer and had my Gamma Knife. But he covered my business while I was out, and I had this very cutting edge treatment, and it was a really scary time. But it was also, I knew I was supported, and I knew that, that I was going to be okay, both professionally and personally. And so I responded really well to that treatment. And this is what my husband and I branded ourselves as the Incredibles throughout that process. And so it's what happened with Till was I responded really, really well to it. And then I came back in most of 2021, I was just being monitored. And I had this one festering problem, which is what my doctor kept calling this one tumor that kept growing in my liver. Everything else was disappearing. And so I named the tumor Uncle Fester. And in September of last year, my doctor said, what I want to do is cut you open and take this out. I want to take this tumor out. I want to take any remaining cancer out of your body, and never one to argue with that. I was like, okay, fine. And so what then ended up happening is I had this major surgery that left a foot-long incision on my abdomen in September of 2021. And again, Ted and my entire team were covering for me. And I woke up from surgery and I heard the words we never thought we would hear. My doctor said to me, Katie, we got everything. You are Ned, no evidence of disease. And so for 6 months, I have been Ned, which is just a dream when you consider where I was at the start of my diagnosis. And so I feel like I finally have created this life in this space that really allows me to do all the things that I want to do. And when I had my annual review with Ted this year, he literally took more notes on my personal goals than he did on my professional goals. He wanted to hear about it. He wanted to sponsor today's event. It's such an amazing place to be, to have this kind of support and to be able to follow these dreams. And hopefully, you know, in some cases I do get paid for speaking and that can turn into a channel for that. But for now, I want to share my story. I want to give hope to people. And I love that having this job and having the time to pursue my passions allows me to do both. I do recognize that it's a luxury and that not everybody can do this. My husband has really good insurance through his work, and I totally recognize that is a luxury that I have. Obviously, health insurance is very important to me. But I think that what I want to challenge you today is to really sit with those feelings on what it is that you want, and to start asking those questions of how do you get there? And if a 4-day work week is something that's feasible, it's likely not something that companies are just going to offer you. But if you're a proven producer and maybe it means you take a 1/5 pay cut and you're okay with that trade-off, it's something to consider. It doesn't hurt to ask. I think with COVID, we've all found a lot of us are getting to work from home. And I think that's something that is also a huge luxury. I eat healthier, I work out more with that. And so I think that's something that's important to a lot of people that a lot of people are starting to get. And so really, that's my message today. And hopefully all of that made sense to you. And at this point, would love to open it up to any questions, and really appreciate you all being here today and hearing what I have to say.
Katie, thank you. I don't know about you, but we need to give her an awesome standing ovation. And I don't know if you can put yourself on video, but I mean, everyone out there, we have 32 people on. Katie, thank you so much. This is exactly the kind of message that I wanted all of you to hear, because through COVID and through all of my clients and through what Katie does with her clients and how she now lives her life, we want you to live at 110%. And I hope this story that you've taken away some amazing nuggets and an amazing message. So Katie, one of your messages was really sit with your feelings and write about it and journal about it. What other advice do you have for anyone going through transition, whether it's job or divorce or money or whatever, of truly, what have been like the biggest 3 lessons throughout this journey for you?
Okay, let me think about that for a minute. I mean, I would say, one of the biggest lessons is community. I have dumped some friends that needed dumping. And sometimes it's just through ghosting, and other times it's through really difficult conversations, depending on the relationship and what I felt was owed. But I've eliminated a lot of toxicity in my life. And on the flip side of that, I have developed just incredible relationships with some people that it really surprised me. And so I think when it comes to just life in general, when things are shit and you're feeling lost, knowing who those people are that can be the sounding board for you. But if it's a professional thing and you're struggling or you're wanting to make a shift, my advice, always high kicks for networking. start reaching out to the people that you admire, the people that you trust, maybe people you don't really know, but happen to be in your network, and ask, can I pick your brain? Or, just start talking to people, because a lot can happen through that magic of connection. And then the other thing I would say is to feel all the feels. I think we all want to feel joy all the time. And like, wouldn't that be nice? But the reality is life happens, and sometimes it's really ugly. And so for me, I'm Ned, and I had no idea of the emotional aftermath that was going to come from being Ned. I've never felt survivor's guilt before in my life, because I never identified as a survivor. And suddenly I do. And so now I'm dealing with these emotions as I lose friends who are battling the same cancer that I just survived. And I am really struggling with those emotions. And someone said to me recently, well, you shouldn't feel guilty. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't weigh in on that if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so it's honoring those emotions and not trying to ignore them, not trying to push them away, but figuring out a way to work through them, and really showing myself grace. And so I think that grace is something that I struggle with, grace all around, to show other people, to show myself. And so it's showing myself the grace when I get irritable, and then I beat myself up for being irritable because I should be happy all the time, right? And it's like, no, I'm human, so I'm still going to have this range of emotions, and I need to allow them and not control them.
Thank you. We've got a lot of messages coming through on what an amazing journey and story of perseverance. And Alan, my good friend, is also on the phone, has been cancer-free for 2 years. So because of what Katie and I do, we are both recruiters. We're both speakers in the community. We have big communities. For me, Katie, what I heard in your message is that you have to not live for other people, but really focus on the trust of what your soul is telling you, and surround yourself with a beautiful community that's inclusive. And I can't even tell you how many of my clients have toxic bosses. They've been gaslit, they've been fired. So as you have been in recruitment for a really long time, how have you seen the job market changing, and how are employers leaning into more of the hybrid work weeks, or remote, or hearing requests like yours, and really employing the whole person versus just like that vice president that didn't even know who you were? So what have you seen out there? And then I can chime in on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you would agree. I've never seen anything like what is happening right now. I think clients are pickier than they've ever been, and candidates are pickier than they've ever been. And I think what I see is the people who have the hardest time asking for what they want is the people who are my peers in terms of, I'm 40 years old, I have 20 so years of experience. And I would say people with like that 18 to 25 years experience are the ones that I'm talking to who are kind of undervaluing themselves, because we've been through so many ups and downs in the market. And so I encourage a lot of people to really make sure you're doing research on what you're worth, being able to speak to that, being able to ask for that. And along with all of the other things that you want to ask for. And from a client perspective, it's, understanding that like 4 days from this person compared to 5 days from this person, you may get that 5th day from somebody, but if that 4-day person has the kind of experience and the kind of energy that you're looking for, what is that really worth? And so I think companies are really starting to realize that they need to shift what they're looking for. We're finding that companies that are requiring full-time on-site, they're soon going to be struggling so badly to get talent. We're finding hybrid optional is kind of the best, because we have a lot of candidates who are like, I want an office to go into. So my company, we have shared workspace. And if there's a day where I'm like, hey, Ted, I need to get out of my house, I want to go into an office today, he signs me up for that, and I can have that. And so I think having that flexibility is what's going to be very important to retaining talent in the future.
I can't even tell you how much I agree with you. As I mentioned before, I was just interviewed by the business section for the Denver Post, and women especially are 24% more likely to permanently lose their job, and especially BIPOC women who have needed that change, or people who represent as women. And so what I've hoped that the audience has heard today is that you need, and it's good to show up as all of you, to be authentically you and inclusive. And that's the good, bad, the ugly, and the happy and the crappy. I mean, what a gift that Katie has Ted as her boss. I have several clients who have moved into companies that are value oriented. So everyone out there, please know what you're worth, ask for what you're worth, and sit with those feelings. The way that I moved from a very toxic, very high level corporate job was through that experience with the Camino de Santiago in Spain, that inner pilgrimage through a program called Positive Intelligence, which I also offer to my clients, and several of you online have been on. It's really about living fully into who you are. So we have about 6 more minutes. I'd love to see questions or comments or just anything coming up for you, Katie. What are the hot jobs that you're looking for right now?
Yeah, one point I wanted to make before I move to that is, I think the other thing that's been very interesting is so many people were laid off during the pandemic and then took jobs out of desperation.
Right.
And then now are leaving those jobs. And I've noticed that companies were showing so much grace during the pandemic. And now it's like, well, why were you only there for a year? And so I would say to anyone who's a hiring manager, remember what it's like when the job market is bad, you take what you can get. And then when the job market shifts again, you want to go back out and find something that is a better match. And so that's something that it kind of bothers me about the market right now, is there's been a lot of movement and we were really, really nice about it during 2020. And then suddenly now it's 2022 and people are starting to not be as graceful about the why behind it. And so I think that we've all, in the last 2 years, things have been shaken up, and some of us have ended up in roles we didn't think we would. And now we're trying to find our way back because the market's hot again. So I just think that's another interesting observation from the last couple of years. Hot jobs, really, really hot jobs on the development side, .NET developers, Java developers, DevOps, a lot going on in that space.
I see also customer success, customer engagement, client success, client satisfaction. There's a lot of HR jobs out there where my clients land. And I know that Katie also works with HR. I am helping construction company. I have worked with one of Katie's clients in SaaS technology. So the market is great out there for you right now. But let's go back to the main message of today. Live a life that you love. Lean into people who are truly your community and get rid of toxicity. If fear, Katie, how have you gotten over fear throughout your, that's a big topic, I know.
Yeah. I still have a tremendous amount of fear, and I am huge into mantras and affirmations. So when I have a fear, I let myself sit with that. I try to recognize what it is, why it is. And then I go back to my beliefs and I go back to my mantras of I am safe, I am healthy. But my fears right now are really high. I mean, my body has been betraying me for 15 years. I had other health issues in my 20s. So I'm in this new place and I'm trying to adjust to life as a healthy person. And that's a foreign feeling to me. And so I get paranoid. And my therapist / acupuncturist was like, be nice to yourself. You have reason to be worried and you need to reshift your mindset to know that you are a healthy person now. And so, I am healthy. I trust my body. Those are some of my mantras that I will say to kind of calm myself when the dark thoughts creep in.
Well, as an entrepreneur, I've definitely had those dark thoughts as well. And changing your mindset to be mentally fit, as well as mentally healthy. Absolutely. Before this session today, I pulled a gratitude card and I wanted to read it to you. Gladly accept the gifts of the present hour. So I hope for everyone out there that you've gotten gifts from this hour, that you will continue to live your best life, to learn from Katie's experience, to live in abundance, to have movement in your life with dance or fun, and have faith over fear. And when I say faith, I'm not talking about religious faith. Katie mentioned crystals and the universe. I'll put some of my own crystal healers in the recording session. And Katie, if you can share yours as well,
Yeah.
we'll put that in there for you. And if that's not for you, that's okay. But I will tell you that through my own inner pilgrimage, through having friends and colleagues in my network like Katie, it has allowed me to do what I can and to bring back to my community and Katie's community presentations like this. Katie, thank you so much. IQ Clarity, thank you so much for the sponsorship of today. I'd love to hear from all of you. We will be sending this recording out, and energy healer Joanna Resnick. I have one, Hope Hughes. She just did Reiki and energy healing on me this weekend. We got through a ton of fear. If you have that fear, Katie and I understand. Lean into faith over fear. Believe in yourself. And the 3 lessons again, get rid of toxicity and have the right community. And I hope Colorado Career Connectors is in your right community. Networking, trust yourself. Get out there and pick the brain of other people. And that includes Katie and I. And feel all the feelings. Feel all those feelings. Sometimes it sucks. And sometimes it's a fuckity fuck fuck, like Katie said earlier. And sometimes there's just pure, raw joy. We want to hear all of you. We want to see all of you. And we want to know all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to having you on April 25th with Brian Kerr, who's coming from, and a good friend of Katie's.
Yay.
He's an HR business manager at Sovereign. Another good friend of mine who's an HR consultant will be coming. And I've got some awesome people on deck for you, just like Katie. I can't wait to see you. Thank you so much. Please let us know how we can be of service. And namaste to you, Harry. Namaste to all of you. And thank you so much. Katie, if you can stay on a little bit, that would be awesome.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Katie.